Those Gamecocks may turn out to be pretty good. We got Will Gunter on the line from the all-new early game talking up South Carolina football as they wrapped up the spring session this past Saturday. Will, what's going on today?
A Monday after the spring game, we've had multiple transfers in the portal. It's been a lot of fun as we try and narrow down what is now a beast roster. It should be a lot of fun over the next few weeks as we try and figure out everything that's going on.
You know, I should have known to check the South Carolina transfer portal before I got you on here. I should have anticipated that. So what is going on?
Well, today we, as expected, the NCAA, because of the rules, obviously trying to whittle down the what do we want to say, the college roster to 85. And so South Carolina having to meet the 85 limit. And so you've had E.J. Jenkins, Jakeem Green, Devontae Davis, all players that have entered the transfer portal, and which is understandable. This is going to happen across the country. But the bottom line is, yeah, it's been a busy day as a South Carolina, as someone who covers South Carolina and trying to figure out what's going to happen and what's going to go on with the roster as we try to whittle it down and move forward with the new limits implemented by the NCAA.
So were any of those meaningful to you in regards to an impact on this upcoming season?
E.J. Jenkins was very interesting, obviously. He's a guy who transferred in from St. Francis last year and was 6'8", 6'7", 6'9", I don't know, depends on what you want to believe. 240. A lot of people had considered him kind of a Kyle Pitts from Florida type clone, but a mismatch. And he elects to transfer out. He originally, we should add, came from St. Francis, so a Division II school. Came with Jason Brown, a quarterback who won South Carolina a lot of games last year, and elected to transfer up to Virginia Tech. But E.J. Jenkins, I think, is an interesting transfer, but you have to deal with the numbers for not just South Carolina, but again, across the board. But you have to deal with those today, and obviously that was the one that was maybe most interesting.
Yeah, we just saw Jason Brown, as you mentioned, in a Hokies uniform in Blacksburg at their spring game on Saturday, just about the same time that South Carolina got introduced to Spencer Radler. So has he met expectations based on what everybody's hearing out of camp and based on what everybody saw on Saturday?
Yeah, like you said, South Carolina kept their previous 14 practices very kind of tight-lipped and kind of quiet. And so we, as media, were not able to learn a lot as to what was going on. But certainly on Saturday night, I was there and had a chance, took my kids and had a good time and had a chance to tailgate a little bit. But for what Spencer Rattler is being advertised, I thought he was 8 of 10 and certainly showed the quick release, showed the knowledge of the offense, which you want him to see. So, yeah, when you talk about, changes to the offense or changes to the transfer portal, Spencer Rattler was certainly a guy that you go, okay, I understand why he's here. And that's the big thing as it pertains to why South Carolina made the changes they did and why you brought in a guy of the caliber of Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, we talked about how pretty remarkable it was that Shane Beamer got them to the finish line at 7-6, considering how they had to put the quarterback position together with 4 different players starting 3 games and none of them really at the SEC caliber. And now they've got a guy that you would consider to be a top 10 or 12 quarterback in college football running the show now. And he's got a couple weapons in the backfield in Marshawn Lloyd and Juju McDowell, who have obviously shown their wares, but Lloyd looking to stay healthy. And your thoughts about Radler's weapons, both there and on the outside?
Well, it's a great question because we talked about it this morning and we kind of laughed as a person who does a radio show for South Carolina. Where do we draw the line between being too excited and getting really fired up about, oh my goodness, there's so much improved from last season, as opposed to, okay, these guys are average athletes. What you ask, Marshawn Lloyd on Saturday night had a spin move out of the backfield and took off and ran. And it looked fantastic. And if you've watched his highlight video, you said, oh, finally, the guy who tore his ACL, the guy who maybe was not ready to be a SEC running back, finally looks like a running back. Oh, goodness. Thank goodness he's here. You had Christian Bill Smith, who's the transfer from Wake Forest, who was very productive last year. Looked like that guy. And then obviously Juju McDowell, Caleb McDowell, Juju as we call him down here, looked really, really good and was the leading rusher on Saturday. And you say, oh, man, the rushing game, I think we believe in it. So to answer your question with the running game, you had guys who were very productive and very excitable. And you say, okay, I think those guys can create a running game in 2022 that leads you to believe that the offense will be better, coupled with Spencer Rattler, who now can throw the football. And so let's go to that side of it. All of a sudden you see Travion Kenyon, who is a guy who's been very good and has a chance to, at 6'4", 250, to be a big-time tight end. But you throw him in with Austin Stogner coming from Oklahoma, who obviously has college production with him. Juice Wells, Antoine Wells from James Madison. South Carolina looks to have added a lot of parts to their offense that makes you feel very comfortable with what they could be. And I think, Mark, that's the big word, what South Carolina could be in 2022.
Yeah, I'll take that same approach to the defense, because there's a term that gets thrown around, and you hear it all the time as much as I do. This guy's an SEC player. That guy's an SEC player. Well, all those SEC players don't necessarily just play in the SEC. We know what an SEC player is. They don't necessarily play for the 14 schools. They might be out at Oregon or Ohio State, but you know what that deal means. That means he's going to probably play at the next level, at a pretty high level someday, and he's just that kind of dude. He's an SEC player. So on the defensive side, are there more SEC players than there have been for the past couple of years?
I'll start with a guy who we are very interested to see what he can become, and he's going to be a backup to begin with. Terrell Dawkins, transfer from North Carolina State, 6'4", 255 pounds, played kind of an end, a linebacker in his second year at NC State. I don't know. The answer to your question is I don't know. I'm very interested to see, because South Carolina, if you go back and you look at the games, Missouri, they couldn't stop the run. Clemson couldn't stop the run. Even Tennessee, a game in which everybody got caught up in the high flying act here, there, whatever. South Carolina could not stop the run. So how do you perform on the defensive line? Well, right now we know that they've got Zach Pickens, who is an elite level prospect. We know they've got Jordan Strawn, who is an elite level college transfer from Georgia State. We know they got Jordan Birch, who was a 5-star prospect and one of the top 2 or 3 recruits they've ever landed. But you got Terrell Dawkins, who's coming in. And I really like the production of Terrell Dawkins on Saturday night in the spring game. And so with all that being said, it's a great question you ask, because that's the fun thing about spring games, right? Like if the offense wins, if the offensive line wins, you go, oh, the defense stinks. But if the defensive line wins, you go, oh, that offensive line stinks. Well, on Saturday night, we saw some positive and negative from both. We saw the offensive line win a couple battles. We saw the defensive line win a couple battles. But I go back to Terrell Dawkins. He was second on the team, and I don't have all the stats in front of me, and I apologize. He was second on the team in tackles, in sacks for loss, in sacks. This was a guy that comes from North Carolina State who has experience. What does he do for this defensive line, which has got to stand up to the offensive lines of the SEC, Mark? You've got to stop the run in the SEC. You've got to stop it. And so what does Terrell Dawkins do? I think it'll be very interesting to see.
I get so hyped up, fired up, pumped up for spring football, because I'm like, I just see the names and I'm like, oh, they're going to be on TV. And then there's like 3 or 4 plays and I'm like, oh yeah, That's right. This is
And
spring football.
Mark,
It's
we had the
boring.
best tailgate. You know, Lauren. Lauren was with us, and we had, and my son was playing football with other kids we knew, and we had a TV up, and we had a blast at spring game. We were having a great tailgate here at South Carolina. And then you get into the stadium and they run out and you're excited and we're all fired up, hands are up. Oh, this is great. And then they start playing and you go, oh, okay, well, it's a spring game.
Exactly. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you all made the best of it and you made your own fun and your own excitement because it wasn't on the field. That's just the way it is. And that's no knock on the Gamecock.
I tell you, in the South, that's what spring games are, right? Like we were watching South Carolina's baseball team blow an 8-4 lead. They won 9-8, and spring games are fun. And in the South, that's what they are, but they're meaningless. I've seen a bunch of them, and you know, Spencer Radler for South Carolina on Saturday night looked great. He was 7 of 10. He looked like a guy who could be a top 15 pick next year. He looked like a guy that we were projecting last year. But let's be honest, you got to go through Arkansas. You got to go through Georgia. You got to go through Florida. We think Tennessee's going to be pretty good. They're fun to get excited about, and I love them, and they're fun. But Mark, you know, we do this, and we get excited about the spring games, and then you move on to the regular season. Things are not the same, and so we'll see where it goes from here. But I think it's a lot of fun to get excited as we sit here on April 18th.
Will Gunter, the all-new early game, 107.5 the game. Will, we always appreciate the conversation, man. You know that.
You know what? Again, it's April, and it's a lot of fun to get excited. And we are what are we about 133 days away? I think is what one of my producers told me today. 133. I think 133. I could be wrong. Math, check me on that. Well, I say that's until South Carolina. I forgot about week 0. Week 0.
Take off 7.
We get to be very excited about college football, Mark, and I'm excited about it because that's what we talk down here 365 days a year.